Something is cracking inside Melania Trump's legal operation, and the man who knows it better than anyone just said so out loud. Michael Wolff has just made a bombshell claim that is sending shockwaves through political circles, and when you hear exactly what he said and what it means, you are going to understand why this situation just got significantly worse for the First Lady of the United States. It is about a woman who built her entire public existence on control, who deployed that control like a weapon for decades, and who is now sitting inside a federal legal proceeding that she cannot manage, cannot manipulate, and apparently cannot even blame on anyone other than the people she paid a fortune to protect her. Stay with me, because what is happening right now is extraordinary, and it is moving faster than most people realize. Let's start with the quote itself, because every single word of it matters. Wolff said, and I want you to hear this carefully, "We know that she's unhappy about my lawsuit against her. We're probably even more so unhappy with her lawyers who have gotten her into a legal situation that she can't control, because I am suing her. The lawsuit is now in front of a federal judge, and we are waiting for a decision on their bid to have the case dismissed, which we don't think has a chance." 4 sentences, 40 words, and packed inside those 40 words is a forensic dismantling of everything Melania Trump's legal strategy was supposed to accomplish. So let's go through it piece by piece, because the devil, as always, is entirely in the details. When Wolff says she is unhappy about his lawsuit, he is not making a casual observation about her emotional state. He is making a strategic diagnosis. Think about what unhappy actually means in this context. A woman who was confident in her legal position, who believed her team had this situation under control, who trusted that the intimidation campaign she had been running for years would work on Wolff the same way it had worked on everyone else, would not be unhappy. She would be unbothered. She would be the one sitting back watching her lawyers systematically dismantle Wolff's case while he panicked and scrambled and eventually retreated the way everyone before him had retreated. That is what was supposed to happen. That is what her legal team told her would happen. Unhappy means it did not happen. Unhappy means the plan failed. Unhappy means Melania Trump is sitting inside a federal lawsuit she never anticipated being a defendant in, watching the clock tick toward a judge's ruling that her own team cannot guarantee will go her way, and feeling something she has not felt in a very long time. Vulnerable. But here is the part that Wolff said next, and this is the part that nobody is talking about enough. He said she is probably even more unhappy with her lawyers. Read that again. He is not just saying she is losing. He is saying she is losing, and she knows whose fault it is. And the answer is the people she hired to prevent exactly this outcome. Her own legal team. The expensive, high-powered attorneys who looked at the situation, assessed the threat that Wolff represented, and told Melania that the way to handle it was to send him a letter threatening $1 billion in damages and wait for him to fold. That was their strategy. That was the professional legal advice that Melania Trump paid for and apparently trusted. Send the letter, demand the retraction, set the deadline. Watch the journalist calculate the cost of fighting back and decide it is not worth it. It is a strategy that has worked before. It worked on the Daily Mail. It worked on the Daily Beast. It worked on James Carville. It worked on HarperCollins UK. The letter goes out, the target flinches, the story disappears, and Melania's narrative remains intact. Except this time, the target did not flinch. This time, the target hired his own lawyers, invoked New York's anti-SLAPP statute, and filed a preemptive lawsuit against the First Lady of the United States before her team even had time to process what was happening. And now those same lawyers who promised Melania that the intimidation would work are the ones scrambling to find a way out of the mess their strategy created. If Wolff's reading of her internal situation is accurate, and he has every reason to believe it is, Melania Trump is not just frustrated with the lawsuit, she is furious with the people who got her into it. Now let us talk about those lawyers, because they deserve serious scrutiny. Melania Trump does not hire budget legal representation. She never has. The names and firms attached to her legal operation represent some of the most expensive and well-connected legal talent that money can buy. When you are the First Lady of the United States with access to the financial resources of a billionaire president and the implicit backing of the most powerful office on the planet, you do not cut corners on legal counsel. You hire the best. You hire the people who have handled high-stakes cases before, who know how to apply pressure, who understand how to make litigation so expensive and so complicated for the other side that settling or retreating becomes the only rational choice. That is the legal machine Melania has been operating. And it failed. Not because the lawyers were incompetent in the abstract, but because they fundamentally miscalculated their opponent. They read Michael Wolff as just another journalist who could be frightened into silence with the right combination of legal language and financial threat. They were wrong. And the price of that miscalculation is a federal lawsuit that has now been grinding through the courts for months with no clean exit in sight. And speaking of no clean exit, let us examine what Melania's team has actually been doing since Wolf filed that lawsuit, because the tactical picture that emerges is one of delay, obstruction, and venue shopping, dressed up as legitimate legal strategy. The first move after Wolf filed in New York State Court was to remove the case to federal court. This happened in the final quiet days of December 2025, in what Wolf himself described as a signature Trump delaying tactic. On the surface, removal to federal court might seem like a neutral procedural choice, but it was not neutral, it was calculated, because New York State Court is where Wolf's anti-SLAPP protections are at their absolute strongest. New York's anti-SLAPP law is one of the most robust in the country, specifically designed to protect journalists and commentators from exactly the kind of weaponized legal pressure that Melania's team had been applying. By moving the case to federal court, Melania's lawyers were trying to strip Wolf of his most powerful legal shield. They were trying to change the terrain of the battlefield in a way that would disadvantage him and advantage her. That is not a defense on the merits. That is a maneuver, a tactical retreat dressed up as a jurisdictional argument. Then came the service dispute, and this one is worth sitting with. Because of everything Melania's team has done in this case, the service argument may be the single most revealing window into how desperate their strategy actually is. They argued in federal court that Melania Trump had never been properly served with Wolf's lawsuit. The basis for this argument was that the legal papers had been handed to a doorman at Trump Tower, which her team described as not being her actual residence. Let that land for a moment. The First Lady of the United States, one of the most photographed, most recognized, most extensively documented human beings on the planet. A woman protected at all times by the United States Secret Service. A woman whose movements are tracked and recorded and secured at every moment of every day. That woman, according to her legal team, somehow could not be served with legal papers because nobody could figure out how to get documents to her. Think about the absurdity of that argument, and think about what it signals. When your legal strategy requires you to argue that your client is essentially unreachable, you are not making a legitimate jurisdictional claim. You are stalling. You are buying days and weeks and whatever small increments of time you can extract from procedural technicalities, while the underlying case waits and the pressure builds, and the question of what happens when the judge actually rules on the merits continues to hang in the air unanswered. And then there was Florida. Because apparently moving the case from New York State Court to federal court was not enough distance from the legal environment that most disadvantaged Melania's position. Her team went further and argued that the case should be transferred to Florida entirely, citing her residence at Mar-a-Lago. Now, let us be precise about what a Florida transfer actually means in the context of this specific case at this specific moment in American legal history. Florida means a different judge. Florida means a different legal landscape. And Florida, in the fevered calculations of this particular legal team, potentially means Aileen Cannon. The same Aileen Cannon who presided over the classified documents case against Donald Trump with what many legal observers described as extraordinary favoritism toward the defendant. The same Aileen Cannon who was eventually removed from that case. The same Aileen Cannon who was appointed to the federal bench by Donald Trump himself. The idea that Melania's legal team was engineering a pathway to a Florida courtroom with a Trump-appointed judge who has a documented history of favorable rulings toward the Trump family is not paranoid speculation. It is a logical reading of an obvious strategy. Move the case south, find friendlier ground, and hope that the judicial environment in Florida is more receptive to the argument that this entire lawsuit should disappear. Wolf saw it immediately. He named it publicly. He said the judge overseeing the case in New York is already a Trump appointee, and he flagged that fact deliberately because he understood exactly what the Florida push was really about. It was not about convenience, it was about survival, and Wolf is fighting every inch of it. On February 9, 2026, he filed a memorandum opposing the motion to dismiss and simultaneously moved to remand the entire case back to New York State Court, arguing that the removal to federal court in the first place was legally improper. His position has not wavered for a single day since this lawsuit began. The case belongs in New York. The anti-SLAPP protections belong in this fight. And the attempt to escape those protections by dragging the case into friendlier jurisdictions is itself evidence of the exact kind of legal manipulation his lawsuit was designed to expose and stop. As of today, both motions are fully briefed and pending before Judge Mary Kay Viscosil. No ruling has been issued. But the case has not been dismissed. It has not been transferred. It is sitting there, alive and active, with all of its implications fully intact. And when Wolf looks into his camera and says, "The motion to dismiss does not have a chance," he is not whistling in the dark. He is a man who has reviewed every argument the other side has made and concluded, with the backing of his own legal team, that none of it is strong enough to end what he started. Now let us step back further, because to understand how Melania ended up in a legal situation she cannot control, you have to understand the pattern that brought her here. Because this did not begin with Wolf. It did not begin with the billion-dollar threat letter. It began years ago, with a strategy that worked so consistently and so effectively that it apparently never occurred to anyone in Melania's orbit that it might one day backfire catastrophically. The strategy was simple. Threaten. Intimidate. Make the legal and financial cost of publishing or speaking about certain